I took every drug known to man at the same time to stimulate every corner of my brain. And this is the result.
What's up, nerds? How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's having a lovely spring. Welcome to the Movie Mass. It is I, your brother, the movie monk, Jay. Welcome, everybody, from the Bishop of Bull Moose, the Archbishop of Arrow, the Criterion Choir Boy, the Fun City Sister. I'm going to talk to you guys about a Fun City release today. But first, I do want to apologize about my reduced output over the last couple of weeks. April has not been my month for prodigious YouTube output. I've been working on wrapping up on a very long-term academic project that I've been working on since the very beginning of 2025. So I'm trying to wrap up on this really big, sizable academic chunk of work. And so I'm really just trying to focus on that until I wrap it up. So you may not, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, you may not see a ton of videos out of me. I'll try to hit you with 1 or so a week, but it is the name of the game until I can get this big chunk of work off of my back and out of my anus, and then I can kind of move on with other things. I won't have this huge chunk of academic work looming over me. I got to get that out of the way. Professor J, got to get the academic work out of the way. You guys thought I was just born this smart? Just poured that all down in front of me. So you guys know, I've made it no secret on this channel that I like to blind buy things. It's my vice, really. Gambling, yes. Whores, obviously. Drugs, yeah, pretty much all of them. Drinking, that's a given. Blasphemy, yeah. Swearing, copious swearing. Lots of negativity, really. Racial and ethnic slurs. I mean, look, all of these vices aside, my one vice, my 15th vice is that I like to blind buy movies. I like to buy movies that I've never seen before. And what's more is that not only do I like to blind buy films that I've never seen before, I like to blind buy the really big and elaborate, expensive, limited edition, collector's edition, special edition box sets of movies that I've never seen before. So I'm not just spending $20 or $25 on a movie I've never seen before. I'm spending like $50 or $55 or $70 on movies I've never seen before. But hey, had you guys thinking I was smart for a second, right? Anyway, I did that, as you guys know, if you saw my my video at the beginning of this month where I told you all about the things that I bought in the month of March, then you guys know that I purchased a copy of Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains from Fun City Editions. There's the spine. As you can see, I bought the very elaborate, very thick, very chunky box set. And I have to say, I'm not upset with this purchase at all. But I thought that I would do a video wherein I watch this and I respond to it. Since it's a film that I, as of right now, have never seen before, why not, right? Why not turn my terrible vices into content for this channel? Anyway, so like I said, I bought this shit. I ain't never seen it before. I wanted to get my hands on it before it sold out. This is the special edition, and I didn't know how long this was going to last. So I picked this up in March, and I thought, you know, this might be a good movie to watch in the springtime. I'm thinking that based on what little I know about this film, it's perfectly appropriate to watch here in April as spring is springing. I'm here in Maine, and we ain't got no snow left. It's a beautiful day. I spent some time in the yard today trying to make it look nice again. But it ain't never gonna look as nice as this box set. I mean, look at that lovely spot gloss on that record that's kind of protruding. The cover design is, of course, it's supposed to look like this is like one of those, like when you get a single and it comes in the paper and the single slides up out of the paper, like when you get a record. I don't know if you guys have like records, the singles that come in like the little paper. It's just like that. And so yeah, front, back, looking nice. There is a little bit of embossing here on the text as well as along the spine. There is embossing and spot glossing on the text along the spine too. So it's really very handsome presentation by Fun City Editions. I must commend them for this. It feels well worth I think I spent 40 or 45 on this. So, you know, for 45 bucks, this feels appropriately weighted for that cost. We'll see what I wind up thinking about the movie here shortly, though. This is an early 80s film. That's kind of my lane. That's sort of my era. You know, I was young during the 80s, but I was alive for most of them. I was born in 81. A film from 83, I believe this film is from 83, just off the top of my head. So a film from 1983. This would have had a play on television in the middle to late 80s when I was young, and I probably wasn't, as a 6-year-old, sitting through Fabulous Stains, but even still, the aesthetic really kind of brings me back to that early nostalgia of television watching as a very young, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9, in that range, late 80s kind of television watching. So I do kind of gravitate towards this era of release for sure. Also, this is Fun City Edition's first 4K. This is the first 4K UHD that they've released, and I do believe that they're working on more. But this being their first, you know, I want to support that effort. I want to see more 4Ks coming from every boutique. I want to see every boutique putting out just as many 4Ks as they can possibly muster, because I want to buy as many 4Ks as they can possibly muster. So I want to support Fun City in their work, putting out releases like this that, again, feel prestigious in their physical form. When you grip this thick, black bad boy in your hand, you just think, oof, that's even bigger than I expected. Whoa. That's what he said. So, you know, Fun City obviously has a pretty good reputation for the type of stuff that they put out for their restorations and their releases. I think they have a very solid reputation. They're maybe not as prolific as something like Arrow or Criterion putting out 6 releases a month, but obviously they're a lot smaller too. And I think they're going for like a quality over quantity type of output, which I also have to appreciate that, you know, if they're really going to put their and stake their name on the quality of their releases, I think, you know, it's something worthy of support. Let's just hope I like the movie, right? And also, I have avoided trying to really look at too much materials for this film. I don't want to be spoiled. Of course, you can't look at the box. You can't unwrap it and look at the materials or even order it on the website without reading the synopsis. It's clearly about an all-female band known as the Stains. I know that much. They look more like a punk rock band than like 80s pop. I know this is 83, so they're probably not doing a Madonna thing just yet. It's not high 80s, it's a little bit lower 80s, so they're not going to be informed by as much 80s culture. It looks a little bit more punk rock. Diane Lane's haircut, I don't know if you can see that. I'll try to get close enough for you to see that. But Diane Lane's haircut there has kind of a punk rock look to it, I guess. Not so much like an 80s pop. But actually, Diane Lane's makeup in this movie, I'll put a picture up right here. That's probably better than me trying to smush the box into my camera lens. But Diane Lane's makeup has kind of almost like a David Bowie sort of glam rock. Aladdin Sane. You guys know Aladdin Sane. That's Aladdin Sane. Okay, David Bowie. That is, to me, what Diane Lane's makeup kind of reminds me of. Just seeing her image like before watching the movie. So I could be way off base. And maybe you guys are watching this right now thinking like, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking. Obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about. I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm just trying to share my initial opinions going into before having seen the movie. The Stains, I feel like, is a good name for a punk band. By the way, it has that kind of dirty, like the Stains. It seems kind of like Pit Stain or something. Like, it's not very attractive for a lady to be known as a stain, right? Because again, I think like pit stains on a t-shirt, right? You think of that like the t-shirt that you wear outside when you're doing lawn work and it gets yellowed under the armpit after you wear it a few times. You got to throw it away because there's no washing that off. Just throw it away. But the stains, it doesn't sound, it's not like I'm aroused by that, you know, that's attractive. So it's not like one of these like, oh, it's like the Pussycat Dolls or something like that, where it's like, oh, this is a girl band, but they're like supposed to be hot, and you're supposed to want to bang them. So the impression I get from the Stains is like it's not like a sexual thing. It's not like, ooh, you know, like, the girls are up there and they're whatever, like Pussycat Dolls are shaking their ass or whatever. It's not like that. At least the impression that I'm getting. I don't know how right I'll wind up being. The back half of this video might just be me being like, I'm an idiot. By the way, I'm an idiot. It's a short back half of the video. I'm a moron. I don't know what to expect from a film. I mean, what the all-female band gets up to is anybody's guess. I'm kind of interested in sort of, is this a drama about the lives of the band members? Is this about their interpersonal relationships, conflict between the members? Is it a cautionary tale, like sort of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and the drugs especially kind of tore these people apart and ended their lives prematurely? I don't know how much comedy. Is it going to be very funny, or is it like a little bit of comedy? Is it mostly going to be drama? I'm not sure what to expect. Is there going to be romantic subplots? A lot of times, you know, if you're telling a life story, usually there are some romantic subplots as people kind of get together, get married, break up, etc., because that fuels the drama. Is there going to be comedy? I don't know. I'm not sure what to expect. I'm not going to expect a ton of comedy. This doesn't look like a purely comedic early 80s movie. It's not like a Revenge of the Nerds, or I think the artwork is sort of self-serious enough that I'm not seeing like comedy from, I mean, there may be some funny parts, but I'm not seeing like straight comedy from this. It doesn't look like a Caddyshack or something like that. So I've got almost no idea what to expect, and I think that that is going to be for the best. All that being said, I've told you why I blind bought the movie. I've told you what little I know about it. I'm gonna go watch the shit, drink 4 more of these while I'm at it. I'll be right back after I've seen the movie. We'll talk about it a little bit more after that. I'll be right back. All right. Through the power of time-lapse editing, I have seen The Fabulous Stains, and I am returned to discuss it, tell you what I thought. Initial impression, thumbs up. I would give it 3 out of 4 stars. It's a solid film. It has a cinema verite feel to it. It has an almost documentary feel to it. I really liked that. I found it to be highly authentic. I mean, it's not a mockumentary, so if you haven't seen the film, if you haven't seen the film before, I'm about to talk about it, so spoiler alert. Also, if you're expecting it to be almost like a This Is Spinal Tap kind of mockumentary, it's not that. But it does have a cinema verite feel to it, which again, I liked. I think worked well for this particular story, this particular film. Even the era, the authenticity of the film felt pretty good. I really don't know anything about the making of The Fabulous Stains, but it very much feels like it was shot in like real locations, real bars, real nightclubs. There's really nothing that feels artificial about this film. It feels very real, and I think that may have been part of the point. I'll just put the 4K disc back. Here's what it looks like on the inside. Isn't that cool? They got that 4K disc looking like a record. Obviously, it's got the reversible artwork. I love this artwork, though. This is kind of the, like the end of the movie when I don't know if it's real or not, but there's the music video part. This is from the music video part. I love the movement. I love like the way her hair is moving as if she's swinging her head. I like everything about that. It looks wicked 80s, and I love it. I don't know. The artwork is great on that. I think all the artwork on this set is great, but it really did feel like it was shot in real locations. They all felt appropriately kind of grimy, kind of seedy, not glamorous at all. Not what you kind of think when you think bands on tour and making money and becoming successful. This is very much like before all of the success. This is like bands, very low level, regional. They're on a grind. They're grinding from like dive bar to dive bar. And they did a great job kind of capturing that shitty green room feeling of this type of place. So kudos to them for like the texture of this film, the visual, the texture, spot on. I did laugh my fucking ass off at Third Degree Burns. Like, that's Diane Lane's. She's Corinne Burns, but like, I'm Third Degree Burns. Like, I need to have like I don't know what, it was like early 80s punk rock, right? Like, we need to have some kind of like superhero name. Like, I've got my alter ego, I'm Third Degree Burns. Like, come on, man. Like, I don't know, it just sounds so stupid. Like, she should be like a wrestler with that name. I thought it was silly. I think it's silly if you have to come up with a name for like a show name for myself. Like, I don't know, a nom de plume, but for my punk rock band, I'm Third Degree Burns. Yeah, because Corinne is just not intense, right? Like Corinne, like whatever. My aunt's name is Corinne. Like, it's Third Degree Burns. Anyway, I thought that was like silly. I kind of laughed at that. And I think some of the comedy in this film was like more subtle. They weren't like any overt pratfall, like Chevy Chase stepping on the rake and the thing coming up and hitting him in the head, or, Chris Farley living in a van down by the river. I think even though they did kind of sleep in vans down by the river, that sort of, tour van, tour bus down by the river sort of thing, it wasn't played for laughs or humor. So there was a little bit of humor in this film. I think you're supposed to chuckle a little bit at like the Third Degree, like the way she takes herself so seriously with like a Third Degree Burns or whatever. It's the type of silly thing that you might laugh at, but it's not overt comedy. So I'm glad I didn't go in expecting a more comedic film. One thing that I learned watching the film is that the Stains are actually a really shitty punk band. And this is not coming from me as somebody who doesn't really like punk music. That's true. I'm not a big punk rock person. I listen to punk rock and I think anybody could do this. I think there's no real skill involved in punk rock. And maybe there's some of you out there that are like wanting to reach into the computer and smack me for saying that. But I think the point of punk rock is that like they were reacting as a response to the earlier part of the 70s where a lot of the music was, Led Zeppelin and a lot of like virtuoso, like rock, prog rock stuff that was getting really kind of bombastic in its production values and stuff. Big light shows and 7-minute songs and guitar solos and shit like that, where punk rock was shorter songs, much more simple, very much like straight, direct, to the point, really stripped down, but like very aggressive. I understand like where punk rock kind of falls historically, and I also think it makes sense in a historical context. I just don't think that like it's hard to learn how to play classical piano. Like, I don't think it's that hard to learn how to play bass in a punk rock band or something like that. We just see that the Stains are like, they're a shitty band. Like, they don't seem to have any actual musical talent. Going into the Fabulous Stains, I don't know, I thought they might actually have some musical talent. They really don't have any musical talent. It's like they just picked up the instruments a week before. Like, they managed to get on this tour, and I know it's a low-level kind of intro tour. They're not opening for the Rolling Stones or anything. They're on this really low-level kind of dive bar tour, but when they go out for their first show on the tour and they get up there, they're almost like, we don't know what we're doing. Why did we sign up for this? And even the people in the shitty bar, like the drunk people in the shitty bar, are like, go home, you suck. Like, what are you doing? Like, and so what we wind up seeing is less them making it based on their musical ability and people are impressed by what they're able to perform. It really becomes the other aspects of the performance, like the attitude and the look, the fashion that goes along with their like persona as a band, which I thought was another interesting angle for the film to pursue. Corinne, the Third Degree Burns girl, she seems actually really, really good, on the other hand, at marketing herself and promoting herself, like versus the music. Like, she's terrible at music, but she's a virtuoso when it comes to promoting herself and marketing herself and her bandmates. She really seems to intuit how to go viral. And then this is in 1983, when going viral, yeah, it was still a thing. We didn't call it that, but it was a very different type of thing. You didn't go viral online because there was no online. she did trend in this film, but in a more analog, early 80s kind of way. And so she crafts this image for herself. I was only further supported in my impression of glam rock, of David Bowie, Aladdin Sane, watching the movie. Like, yeah, it seemed like her ethic, especially when it comes to having no musical talent, was kind of punk rock. And maybe even like her feminist edge to her music was very punk rock. But her look, in my opinion, was not very punk rock at all. It was very, I feel like a punk rock look is more like, I don't give a fuck, right? Same with the music. Like, I'm not here to play classical piano. We're not doing anything ornate or elaborate or complicated. We're here to play a quick, peppy 2-minute song where we're drunk and high on heroin anyway, because we're in the Sex Pistols. I think for her, it was very much like a crafted image that didn't seem very, it felt more glam rock than punk rock to me in how she kind of put herself together, the thought that she put into her makeup. It created a visually striking image, I think, which is good for us as viewers, and also helped her to amass this following of girls that wanted to be like her. But it's not like those girls were like, oh, I want to play music like you, because they sucked at music. They were like, well, we want to look like her. We want to have that badass kind of attitude. We want to take on this sort of third-degree burns persona. So rather than producing this catalog of music, they produce a moment for themselves, kind of a cultural moment for themselves that resonates with fans of their overt feminist messaging and their subversive fashion style, which does feel like a kind of a proto-80s fashion style. I mean, it does look like the type of thing that would like get pulled into the 80s and incorporated with other stuff and then come out as like a high 80s, you know, like 88, 89 kind of post-Madonna look. Her appearance, her fashion very much felt like the type of thing that's going to get kneaded in and worked into like that whole, when you think about the 80s, like what the fashion was like. The Stains were very much style over substance is what I'm trying to say. And I think what may have been the biggest surprise for me about this film is just how much a flash in the pan the Stains were. It's really hard to say exactly what the ending of The Fabulous Stains means from a narrative perspective. Like, what are they telling us with this ending? Because the music video style ending is an abrupt departure from the rest of the film. I had mentioned how the film looks so like realistic and cinema veritas and grimy. Well, like MTV Music Video does not have a cinema veritas. It's all cuts and lighting and sort of perfection and I'm viewing the ending as kind of a outro, a coda, almost a postscript to the story that really just ends with Corinne bailing from the tour after the Stains just completely crash and burn. I think that we're supposed to interpret that like final like MTV style music video performance as not really like the true narrative ending for the Stains. Like, they didn't go on to find success in the music industry and like learn how to play their instruments, and then, you know, a couple of years later they're releasing successful albums. I think that was more of like a fever dream for both Corinne, the character, as well as kind of the audience, like a coda for us to just finally, like the whole movie, you're like sort of waiting to see them like rock out. So we finally get to see them kind of rock out at the end. It's like Boogie Nights. You're like waiting to see Dirk Diggler's dick the whole time because you're like, well, how big can this thing really be? And then they make you wait till the very end when he pulls it out. And you're like, oh, all right, that's a hog. I mean, there's less penis than that in The Fabulous Stains, but it is sort of one of those things where you're sort of waiting for them to like actually perform and perform at an entertaining level, and they never do. So I think that coda at the end is like a postscript for us, the fans. It's sort of a release for us, but it's sort of like a big what if. Like, what if the band had talent and been successful versus just kind of kids who really weren't prepared for that level of success or scrutiny and just kind of crashed and burned, which is a much more realistic story, I think, for the Stains, for the Fabulous Stains to tell. So like the glitz and glamour of that final vision of the Stains' success contrasts with the realism of the rest of the film, like I said. So because of that really sharp contrast to me, I don't take it as being like a narrative part of the actual like diegesis of the rest of the story that we had seen up to that point. So, you know, the whole movie, you feel the rust and the grime of these places. You can practically smell the cigarette smoke and the stale beer. Every setting is like this depressed Rust Belt town or dive bar or seedy motel room or their dilapidated tour bus. You just have this ending that gets tacked on, and it was filmed actually a couple of years later too. So the actresses even look a little older because they are. They didn't mean to do it that way. The director and the writer argued over how the film should end. So the director actually wound up tacking the ending on a year or two later. So it was filmed afterward, after the fact. So I think all of that combined really just kind of leads me to believe that this ending is just kind of a fun, kind of upbeat and peppy way to end. Like, I think the story really ends on this kind of downer note with a little bit of hopefulness as she realizes that she's like sort of spread her image a little bit. It's a jarring ending, but I think it works thematically. It's audacious a little bit. It adds some ambiguity to like what really happens to the Stains. Do you want to believe that they return to the music industry and that they hit it big and they're releasing singles in the mid 80s and they're all over MTV? Maybe. I mean, you could walk away from the film believing that that's what happened, but I actually think that there's a lot going on in this film. I don't think that it all meshes perfectly well. That's why I'm kind of 3 stars out of 4. I think there's a lot of themes that kind of go a little unexplained. They get sort of laid out there, but never really followed up on. So it feels like there's a few threads that don't really tie together properly by the end. There's a strong element of feminism, which you probably should expect going into the Fabulous Stains. I expected it. I mean, honestly, it's an all-female punk rock band. You have to expect some feminism and feminist messaging to be a part of like, A, the film's themes and motifs, but then also just the band. Like, what's their story and what are they putting out as a band within the narrative? And so a lot of like what the Stains are about is like their agency, their bodily autonomy, their agency to choose. They've got that whole message we don't put out. And that's what allows them, I think, to connect with an audience inside the story. You know, they grow this audience mainly based on their messaging and their fashion and girls wanting to be like them, not because they're producing great music that gets played on the radio. It's more because people click with their message, especially their female audience clicks with the message that the Stains are putting out. And so there's definitely like strong feminism in that. How is that resolved in the end? I mean, Corinne definitely chooses to go her own way instead of, you know, opening up for her would-be boyfriend's band. This guy, you know, wants a piece, but he's obviously trying to keep her in a more of a submissive role. He's trying to maintain this position, this higher position in the hierarchy, and that could be because he's a male and she's a female, or it also could be because he was the star before he was the rising star before the Stains came on the tour, and they overshadowed him about midway through the tour because they were connecting so well with the fans through their messaging. So there's definitely some of that I don't think gets resolved perfectly in the end, but very interesting stuff to think about as you're watching the film. There's also themes of like front of the house versus backstage in like a glamorous industry. We see like music. We see musicians, especially if they're very successful. When you talk about the bands that everyone's heard of the 80s, you think of like the glamour, the glitz, the wealth. You don't get that here. Obviously, these are very low-level, very entry-level musicians that have not achieved that level of fame yet. So there's this very like front of house versus backstage. And so it's not just like the grimy venues. I mentioned those earlier, but throughout the film, there's like some sort of like back of house sort of, this is what it looks like when they pull the curtains back. There's a shot early in the film that pulls away from a news bulletin to reveal the setup of the soundstage. Like if we were to pull this camera back right now, if I hit the button and zoomed out right now, you know, you start to see like my wife's exercise bike over here, and you start to see there's an old TV over there. Like, you know, I'm curating for you with the framing exactly how much of my room you can see. But what I'm keeping out of the frame is the stuff that I don't want you to see. And that's very much a part of this film too, in that, like, what do you curate for an audience to see? What do you want to show the people in the front of the house versus what's behind the curtain? And so you'll see this soundstage. Very early in the film, they establish this. You know, you're seeing this this sort of news reel in the beginning of the film, and it looks nice. The guy's sitting in a nice chair. He's got this nice screen beside him. He's wearing a suit, and he's going through this very, like, well-produced newsreel. But then the camera pulls back, and you see the ladders, and you see the soundstage, you see the grips, and you see ropes, and you see the camera operator, and all of a sudden you're reminded this is a set. This is a set where there's work being done, and they're going to clear his shit out, and they're going to film something else there an hour later. And so you get this, like, artifice. Artifice is the word that I want to say. The artifice of what winds up being presented to people. There's not much said about the artifice being revealed. It's just kind of a motif in the film that it doesn't get explored real fully. There's also narrative elements of, like, naive, young, aspiring musicians that don't have a lot of power yet because they're relative unknowns, and they're being taken advantage of by the industry. They're experiencing the greed and avarice of management that's a little higher up that wants to use them and kind of throw them away. That's never really followed up on either. It's certainly part of the narrative. It shapes the arc for the Stains, you know, where they wind up going through the story, but it's never really commented on too fully. There's an early look at a memification or virality in the invention and spread of a public persona, and that we see kind of followed up on at the end. I think that one's pretty well capped, you know, because in the end we do see that Corinne recognizes that her contribution may be not what she wanted it to be, but she has sort of spread, like her messaging and her sort of sensibilities with regard to, like, her feminism and her personal style has spread, because she looks around and she sees the other girls that are sort of dressed like her, sort of following that trend, and she realizes that she has had some ripple effect. And so I think that one's followed up fairly well, but you know, selling out to corporate interests obviously is part of this music story versus, like, being genuine and authentic. You know, do you do the thing that they want you to do, or do you try to stick with your message and play your music, or do you sort of, like, put on the makeup and polish up and look nice for the cameras and do the interviews, or you know, are you more, like, authentically true to yourself? And so that's sort of explored a little bit here in The Stains, but never really followed up on. There's some commentary on the cycle of youth rebellion in popular culture that, you know, even as in 1983, as this film is released, I mean, punk rock was waning. It was on the wane. I think the punk rock era is more that late 70s, you know, 77, 78, 79, 80. And really, once we get into the 80s, that movement is really starting to recede again. And so you have this cycle of youth rebellion. You know, you have that aging rocker who is more of, like, you know, a Kiss style, you know, more of a glam rocker with lots of music and heavily made up, and he's sort of aging out, and the punk rockers are coming up. And so you get this sort of idea that, you know, every decade or every 8 years, you know, you're sort of washing out with the old, in with the new, right? And that sort of feels how the Stains are coming in, and they have a different take on the whole punk rock ethos, and they're involving a little bit more glam rock type of ethic there as well. There's also themes of how the news media, et cetera, can both make as well as distort the public persona. So, like, the Stains, how they're filtered through the media is a theme of this film as well. That's really kind of left open to interpretation, but it's explored how certain media portrayals of them are actually very beneficial to them, but then ultimately how they're kind of pulled apart by the media as well. And the filmmakers, I think, go without judgment, but it does make you wonder, is this a critique of how the media ultimately used the Stains for ratings to try to make money by exploiting these girls, and eventually pulled them apart and discarded them, just like the record label did as well. So there's a lot of ideas, I think, that swirl around the Fabulous Stains that are really very fascinating to consider and contemplate, but don't really get like classic Hollywood completion to those themes and those narrative elements, which, you know, again, it's not a classic Hollywood film, so maybe that's for the best, and maybe that's part of what makes this film, I think, more of an underground kind of cult film throughout the 80s, and I know it was available on DVD many years ago, probably 20 years ago, but it was not available, I think, on Blu-ray until Fun City Editions released it, and so I wonder how all of this stuff gels. I wonder if it gels into like a perfect casserole of a film, or if it's really just kind of an interesting buffet. I'm leaning towards it's an interesting buffet. Again, great film, I think, very well worth the money. I do not regret the purchase at all. 3 out of 4 stars, would buy again, that kind of thing. It definitely turned out pretty good, and this is not a blind buy that bit me in the ass. So if you're still thinking about, if you're on the fence about The Fabulous Stains and you haven't watched it yet, I don't know, you just listened to me spoil the damn movie. I didn't give too much away, so there's still enough there, I think, for you to go enjoy this film. I would recommend this film to a friend, particularly somebody who likes 80s movies and maybe is interested in the history of music. That's also interesting. I would also recommend my Patreon to you fools out there. You know what to do, you know how to do it. I love you if you've watched this video. If you've hung out with me this far, may the Buddha bless you with enjoyable blind buys in the future. I hope that all of your blind buys are beneficial and beautiful. And I will drink this in your honor. I'll catch you guys again in the future at some point in time. I'm not done. I haven't died. And, you know, I just got to knock out this big old project. But first, I'm going to knock this thing out right here. You guys have a good one. Peace. Adios.
You are physically repulsive, intellectually retarded, you're morally reprehensible, vulgar, insensitive, selfish, stupid. You have no taste, a lousy sense of humor, and you smell.
Fuck you, Cher.